They called an HOA cop on me, but I'm a federal agent. If I told you a clipboard could start a war, you'd probably laugh. But that clipboard, cheap plastic, scuffed at the corners, clutched in the pale knuckles of a man pretending to be important, slammed into the hood of my SUV like a declaration of battle. What followed wasn't just another HOA dispute. It was a slow-burning fire that exposed everything wrong with people who pretend to have power, and what happens when they cross someone who knows exactly how real authority works. I didn't move back home to stir up trouble. Quite the opposite. After 12 years with the Bureau, half of them deep undercover, I just wanted peace. I bought a modest two-story home on the edge of a neighborhood called Cypress Ridge, a name that sounded fancier than it was. The sign out front boasted executive community. But in truth, the place was an aging suburb with cracked sidewalks and a handful of over-manicured lawns trying too hard to impress, and I was fine with that. After years of chasing ghosts in federal task forces, I was ready to be nobody. Just Dana Harper. Just me. But quiet doesn't sit well with some people, especially people like Karen Wilcox. I met Karen 3 days after I moved in. She wasn't carrying a casserole or welcoming me with a smile. No, she marched across my yard like she owned the deed and told me in no uncertain terms that I'd parked my truck incorrectly in my own driveway. I'd just finished unloading the last of my boxes. My Belgian Malinois, Bear, was lounging beside me, tongue out, happy to be out of a cage and off duty. He barked once when she got too close. Karen flinched. "I'll report that," she snapped. "Aggressive behavior." I blinked. "He's on a leash, on my property, not barking at anyone until now. This is a controlled community," she said, tilting her nose up. "There are HOA standards. I wasn't told this neighborhood has an HOA," she scoffed. "We're forming one. A provisional board has been established. I'm acting secretary." That's how she introduced herself, acting secretary of something that didn't officially exist. I didn't bother arguing. I'd dealt with more dangerous people than a self-appointed suburban dictator. I simply nodded and walked back inside. Mistake number one, I underestimated her thirst for control. By the end of the week, a bright orange warning slip was taped to my mailbox, pending fines for unsightly vehicle parking. 2 more appeared on my garage door. Then came a handwritten note slipped under the front door. "Move the vehicle or be removed from the community." It wasn't printed on any official letterhead. There were no signatures, just a looping, aggressive cursive that reeked of Karen. I still said nothing. 2 days later, Bear got out. It was my fault partially. The gate latch was loose. He didn't go far, just into the yard to bark at some squirrels. But someone called HOA security. Let me repeat, not police, not animal control, HOA security. I didn't even know we had any, but they showed up like they were responding to a hostage crisis. 2 guys in tactical-looking black shirts, cargo pants, and utility belts with radios that weren't turned on. One had a taser, the other a clipboard and attitude. "You Harper clipboard guy," asked, already scribbling. "Who are you? We're with Cypress Ridge HOA security. You let a dangerous dog loose. That's a liability and a code violation." According to what code, I asked, stepping between him and Bear, who stood alert beside me. Page 4, Section 3. Dangerous animals and unleashed threats. I crossed my arms. "That's not real law." He raised an eyebrow. "You want to test that I was done being quiet?" I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and flipped it open. "Federal Agent Dana Harper, Department of Justice, and now you're going to explain why you're trespassing, impersonating a security officer, and fabricating codes that don't exist under any legal framework." They froze. For half a second, it looked like the clipboard guy might run. Karen came striding down the street like she'd just won an Oscar. "Oh, good. You're here," she said, smiling at the 2 men like they were personal friends. "She's been refusing to comply. File the violation report." Clipboard guy looked at me, then at her. His hand hovered in the air. "You're done," I said flatly. "Leave my property. Right now, or what Karen spat. I looked straight into her eyes. Or you'll be the one getting served next. She didn't know what to say. Her face flushed with fury. But for once, she didn't speak. The fake officers backed away, muttering something about misunderstandings and following up later. They never did. But that didn't mean it was over. Because people like Karen, they don't back down when they're wrong. They double down. And I'd just become her mission. It started small. An overturned trash can, a broken sprinkler head, a smear of something foul on the side of my mailbox. Bear's dog bowl went missing from the back porch. Twice. Each of these things, on their own, could be chalked up to bad luck or nosy kids. But together they were pressure points, an invisible hand trying to push me, unsettle me, make me lash out. And I knew exactly whose hand that was. Karen had declared war. I didn't respond. Not yet. I'd learned long ago that power doesn't always scream it waits. But I started documenting everything. I installed a few extra cameras, 2 on the corners of the house, one aimed straight at the front yard. Bear had a GPS collar already, but I upgraded it. I logged every interaction in a file labeled Cypress Ridge, active. I wasn't paranoid. I was practiced. Then came the citations. Real-looking documents this time, printed on forged HOA letterhead, sealed in plastic sleeves and pinned to my front door like legal notices. They accused me of violating noise ordinances, property codes, even patio furniture aesthetic harmony, whatever the hell that meant. Each citation came with a fine, first $50, then $200, then one that read, final notice legal action pending, with a charge of $1, $150. The best part, they wanted the checks made out to CRHA Community Improvement Fund. There is no CRHOA. I didn't bite. I didn't pay, but someone else did. Across the street lived Mr. Lionel, a widower in his 80s with shaky knees and a Vietnam hat he never took off. He loved Bear, slipped him treats through the fence, laughed at his own jokes and repeated stories I never got tired of hearing. When I went over to check on him after not seeing him outside for a week, I found him on the porch with his hands shaking. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I think I made a mistake." Karen had sent her board to his door clipboard guy and another tall man with mirrored sunglasses and no badge. They told him his porch furniture was in violation, that he owed back dues, even though he'd lived there 35 years, that if he didn't pay, they'd report him to the city. He paid $900. I thought it was real, he said, eyes damp. They had paperwork. I clenched my jaw. "Can I see it?" He handed me a folder. Inside were 5 pages of faux legal nonsense. All of them forged. All of them signed by Karen Wilcox as acting HOA president. I'd had enough, but I still wasn't going to her. Not yet. I needed evidence. If I was going to bring the hammer down, I wanted it done clean, in daylight, in front of witnesses. So I started asking questions. I spoke to 3 neighbors who had moved out within the last year. 2 had received final notices before selling. One said their water was shut off for 2 days without explanation. None had ever signed HOA paperwork. I dug into county records. Cypress Ridge had no official HOA on file, no permits, no corporate filings, nothing. What Karen had built was a shadow play, a fake structure, enforced with lies, intimidation, and a few low-rent enforcers in tactical pants. A scam that preyed on the vulnerable retirees, immigrants, single parents, anyone she thought wouldn't fight back, and apparently anyone she thought didn't know better. She miscalculated, because I do know better, and I dealt with worse than Karen Wilcox. It all came to a head the night Bear was poisoned. I found him lying on the porch, whining low, his legs shaking. There was vomit on the steps. His pupils were blown wide, and his breathing was shallow. I didn't think. I scooped him up and sped straight to the 24-hour animal clinic. The vet pumped his stomach and saved his life barely. They found traces of rat poison in his system, mixed with bacon. Somebody had tossed it over the fence, and I knew who. That night, I filed a full criminal report, but I didn't stop there. I activated my old credentials. The next morning, a white SUV rolled through the neighborhood. Federal plates. My old partner, Agent Sarah Lockwood, stepped out with a duffel bag and her badge. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. I nodded. "This isn't just about me anymore." "You think they'll take the bait?" I smiled. "Karen's ego won't let her not take it." Sure enough, within hours of Sarah parking in my driveway, Clipboard Guy was back this time with Karen in tow and a new compliance officer who looked like he spent weekends LARPing as a sheriff. They demanded she show ID. Sarah handed over a federal ID, then watched them write her a citation for non-compliant license plate. She let them finish. She smiled. Then she called the U.S. Attorney's Office. The first thing they did wrong, well, the first obvious thing was deliver a second citation after Sarah had already presented a federal ID. They walked up my driveway like they owned the place. Clipboard Guy smirking. Karen wearing some blazer she probably thought made her look official. The new guy wore mirrored Oakleys, cargo pants, and a black polo with HOA security embroidered in gold thread. Sarah was waiting on the porch, cup of coffee in hand. I was inside, recording everything through the window camera. "Miss Lockwood," Karen began, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "you're in violation of Parking Code 3.8b under Cypress Ridge homeowner standards. Your vehicle's front bumper crosses into the walkway by more than 8 inches. Sarah raised her eyebrow. "Cypress Ridge has no such code." Clipboard Guy handed over a folded paper. "You're welcome to file a rebuttal." She took it, glanced at the crumpled seal at the bottom, and smiled like she'd been waiting for it all week. "Thanks," she said. "You've both been very helpful." They walked away victorious until Sarah turned, raised her phone, and snapped a photo of their backs. We didn't wait. As soon as they rounded the block, she uploaded the citation to the joint agency server under an open fraud investigation number. Within hours, a DOJ case file was officially opened. This wasn't just local anymore. This was wire fraud. This was impersonation of government officials. This was a ring, and we had receipts. It turned out, Karen had more people under her thumb than we'd realized. A week after we submitted the evidence, we learned that 3 other HOA zones across the county had identical fines, identical uniforms, and identical scare tactics. She'd sold the idea to a couple of other enforcers, including one ex-military type with a dishonorable discharge and another guy previously arrested for impersonating a police officer. They moved from neighborhood to neighborhood, targeting high-turnover areas or elderly communities. They'd show up in pairs, deliver a few warnings, then escalate. Most people paid to avoid trouble. The rest moved. Nobody had looked closely until now. Then Karen overplayed her hand. Again. It was a Saturday morning when a loud knock shook my door. I opened it to find 2 county officers standing stiffly beside Karen, who had tears in her eyes and an oversized file in her hand. "This woman," Karen began, gesturing at me, "has threatened my safety, made unprovoked calls to federal agencies, and is part of a scheme to undermine our homeowners' rights." I looked at the officers. "She's filing a harassment complaint." They nodded. "Understood," I said. Would you like to come in and review my footage?" Karen paled. I brought them into the living room, pulled up the file labeled Karen Active, and hit play. They watched as Clipboard Guy yelled at Mr. Lionel as Karen snuck around my front garden and tried to peer through my blinds. As the compliance officer tried to open my mailbox, I showed them the fake citations, the signatures, the audio of Karen threatening to get Bear out of the neighborhood if it's the last thing I do. Finally, I played the video of Sarah handing over her badge and getting cited anyway. When I turned back to the officers, neither of them spoke for a full minute. Then one muttered, "Jesus." That afternoon, the sheriff's department launched a parallel investigation. Karen was not just accused of running a fake HOA, now she was under suspicion for mail tampering, elder abuse, and criminal impersonation. And yet, she didn't stop. She couldn't help herself. The next day, she showed up with a warrant. She stood at my front steps with 2 of her officers, a stapled packet in her hand, yelling that I was harboring an illegal resident, referring to Sarah. "You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises," she screamed. That was the moment Sarah walked outside. She wasn't smiling this time. "I'm Agent Lockwood with the Department of Homeland Security," she said, holding up her badge. "You're trespassing on federal surveillance property." Karen blinked. "You're lying," she hissed. Then 6 black SUVs rolled around the corner, real ones this time, with state, county, and federal agents hopping out in vests marked DOJ, DHS, and U.S. Marshals. It was over. Almost. Karen didn't go down quietly. As the agents approached, she screamed, clawed, and yelled about her sovereign authority, claiming she was defending the natural order of the community. They cuffed her. Clipboard guy ran. Didn't get far. The guy in the Oakleys just stood there shaking. They hauled them all in. The news broke within 24 hours. Fake HOA empire busted in countywide sting operation. Dozens defrauded in HOA scam ring. Leader arrested. Veteran agent. Local dog owner. Cracks impersonation network. Suddenly, I wasn't the outsider anymore. Suddenly, people started showing up at my door with casseroles, handwritten thank yous, even cards for Bear. But there was one more thing I had to do. I called a town hall in the park on a sunny Sunday under a picnic pavilion. Mr. Lionel sat in the front row, beaming, his porch furniture approved once again. I stood up, took the mic, and said, "If someone shows up with a badge and a clipboard, ask for their credentials. If they hand you a fine, ask for the law. And if they try to silence you, stand louder. Because the minute we stop asking questions, people like Karen win." The fallout came faster than anyone expected. By Monday morning, every local news van in a 50-mile radius had parked outside our subdivision. Reporters huddled on sidewalks with boom mics and cheap coffee, fighting for sound bites as residents peeked out from behind curtains. The once quiet neighborhood looked like the set of a crime documentary. Karen's mugshot was plastered across every news channel. Still smug, still defiant, but no longer in control. And yet the damage remained. Not just the fake citations, not just the fraud. The real harm was deeper. One by one, people began speaking up. Elderly residents who'd been too afraid to talk. Immigrants who'd been threatened with deportation if they didn't comply. A disabled Vietnam vet who was told his front ramp violated neighborhood aesthetics. And perhaps worst of all, families with children who had been told their autistic son's therapy swing was a public nuisance. The fake HOA hadn't just bullied. They'd targeted. Sarah and I organized community recovery meetings in the church basement. At first, maybe 8 or 9 people came. By the end of the week, there were over 100. They weren't just angry. They were ashamed. Ashamed they'd been tricked. Ashamed they'd let it happen to others. Ashamed they hadn't asked questions sooner. And that was exactly what Karen had counted on. Silence, compliance, division. Now that silence was broken and the unity, it was just beginning. A few days later, I was asked to speak at a press conference. I kept it short. There are real laws, there are real badges, and there are real people willing to use fake ones to intimidate you into silence. But the law doesn't work in shadows, it works in light, and light is what we're bringing back to this community. I wasn't a politician, but I had a badge, and sometimes that was enough. Meanwhile, Sarah worked behind the scenes. With DHS and DOJ coordination, she began connecting our incident to other counties' places that had similar patterns. A retired school teacher in Idaho, a young black couple in Georgia, a widowed veteran in Arizona, all had received citations from neighborhood preservation officers. All had reported the same tactics. All had been ignored. Until now, the investigation bloomed into a full-fledged task force. They called it Project Garden Gate. Our neighborhood became ground zero. Then the lawsuits started rolling in. Not just civil suits against Karen and her cronies, but class actions against the banks that honored her phony liens, against the property management companies that had looked the other way, against the vendors who provided compliance services without verifying contracts. Turns out, Karen had ties to all of them. The worst revelation, she'd received kickbacks from multiple private firms, $250 for every removal service, $500 for every lien successfully paid. It wasn't just a scam. It was a business, an empire. The public wanted answers. So I gave them one better. I gave them the truth. We hosted a live community panel at City Hall, streamed online. I sat next to Sarah, Mr. Lionel, a journalist from the local paper, and unexpectedly, Yolanda Ruiz, a woman who had been part of Karen's fake enforcement team for 6 months before turning whistleblower. Her voice shook at first, but when she spoke, everyone leaned forward. She told us we were protecting property values, that people like Mr. Lionel made the neighborhood look poor, that the dog barked too loud, that ramps were unsightly, that flags on porches made us look like a trailer park. We believed her. I believed her, until she made me threaten a woman with a cane and a Navy flag on her porch. The room went dead silent, then erupted in gasps. The following day, Karen's bail was revoked. Her co-conspirators started turning, fast, and then came the twist no one saw coming. Sarah was offered a promotion to lead the federal task force full-time. She turned to me the night the offer came in. "I want to say yes," she said, "but this is our home. What about you?" I smiled. "You go." I said, "We built this place strong enough to survive now. I'll be here." I didn't stay idle, though. A month later, with the help of the town council, we drafted a new local ordinance, the Community Rights and Transparency Act. It required public registry of all HOA charters, mandatory credential verification for enforcement officers, and a homeowner's right to recording and legal counsel during any dispute. Karen's fake rules. Now they had real ones to answer to. The old HOA signs were removed one by one. In their place, new ones, blue and white. Simple. This is a community of rights, not rules. Sarah left the following month for DC, but she visits. Bear still waits at the front door every Sunday at 5. We sit on the porch, sip sweet tea, and wave at passing neighbors who now smile. Instead of flinching, I never expected the Department of Justice to send a van to my driveway, and I sure as hell didn't expect them to shake my hand like I was some kind of hero. But when you pull back the curtain on an operation as wide and toxic as Karen's fake HOA network, people notice, not just neighbors, not just city council, federal oversight, national media, Congress. The morning Sarah flew to D.C. for her first full briefing with the task force, I stood on the porch with Bear and watched her car disappear down the hill. The house was quiet, too quiet, but the silence didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like peace, the kind you fight for, the kind you earn. The FBI's fraud division confirmed it. Karen's HOA wasn't just a suburban scam. It was part of a growing national scheme, what they called shadow compliance syndicates. Private citizens masquerading as public officials, leveraging false authority to exploit, threaten, and control. And in most cases, they got away with it. Until now, the dominoes fell quickly. 15 arrests, 4 counties, 1 fraudulent title company shuttered permanently, and 1 federal judge issuing a public statement that sent shivers through HOA boards across the country. Compliance is not control. Authority must be earned, not stolen, not imitated, not bought with fear. Karen tried to cut a deal. She blamed everyone else, Yolanda, the vendors, the security team, even the residents themselves. But it didn't work. The prosecutors had hours of footage, emails, bank records, even voice recordings of her mocking families she'd extorted. "I don't care if he's in a wheelchair. If he can't climb the porch, he can move," she'd said. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to 22 years without parole. The courtroom clapped. Even the judge didn't stop them. But this wasn't just about punishment. It was about healing, about change. So we made change. We formed the Community Truth Forum, a nonprofit dedicated to exposing fake HOAs and unlawful property management schemes. Sarah helped launch the national database. I trained local law enforcement on identifying fraudulent enforcement. Even Lionel, the 80-year-old veteran Karen tried to silence, became a public speaker. Old dogs can bite back, he said, smiling through tears at his first televised interview. The change went deeper than that. We saw it in how neighbors talk to each other now, in how people asked questions instead of assuming the worst, in how the neighborhood felt free again, not governed, not monitored, lived in. One Saturday afternoon, as I was fixing the gate that Karen's goons had busted months ago, a young couple approached me. I recognized them immediately. The Smiths. They'd almost sold their house after getting hit with $4,500 in fake violations for lawn height and unauthorized tricycle storage. The wife held something in her hand, a toy, old, weathered, blue with a cracked handlebar. "This belonged to our son," she said, her voice cracking. "We thought it was garbage. Karen made us throw it out, but it turns out she'd kept it in a shed, labeled it evidence." I swallowed hard. They handed it to me. "Can we rebuild the swing set?" she asked. "The real one." This time I nodded. "You don't need my permission," I said. "You've had it all along." Later that evening, I walked the block. The setting sun bathed everything in warm gold. Children laughed on porches. Flags fluttered without fear. The same gate Karen once called non-conforming now had vines of jasmine climbing across it and a small sign beneath the arch. Freedom is never against the rules. At the town hall 2 weeks later, we hosted an open forum. Cameras rolled. Sarah joined remotely, smiling from a screen projected behind us. I stepped up to the mic, and I told them this. No one moves into a neighborhood expecting to be ruled. We just want safety, fairness, belonging. What Karen did wasn't just illegal, it was inhuman. She took people's dignity and called it decorum. She stole homes and called it enforcement. But today, that ends. Today, we make it clear power doesn't come from clipboards or vests or fake titles. It comes from truth. And if you ever forget that, just remember how one fake HOA cop tried to intimidate a federal agent, and how it cost her everything. The room erupted in applause. And now we live, we rebuild, we remember. Bear still naps by the porch. Lionel still plants his tomatoes. And Sarah, she visits once a month more now that she's overseeing legislation to criminalize HOA impersonation at the federal level. We were just neighbors. Now we're a movement. If you've ever been threatened by a fake authority, silenced by fear, or told you don't belong on your own land, speak up, record it, share it, investigate it, because justice only happens when someone refuses to look away. What would you do if a fake HOA cop knocked on your door? Share your story. Speak your truth, because silence is their weapon. But you're the shield.